Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Elevating to the Cloud. We will begin promptly at 12:30 Central Time. Please, we will be taking questions throughout the duration of the presentation today. If you do have a question, please utilize the question and answer feature located at the bottom of the screen. Your chat is disabled and you are muted for the duration of the webinar today. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Elevating to the Cloud. We will start promptly at 12:30. We will be taking questions throughout the duration of the webinar today. Should you have a question, please utilize the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. Again, we'll start promptly at 12:30 Central Time and look forward to chatting with y'all. Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar, Elevating to the Cloud. We will begin promptly at 12:30 p.m. Central Time. We will be taking questions throughout the duration of the program today. Should you have any questions, please utilize the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. Again, we will start promptly at 12:30. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, Elevating to the Cloud. We will begin promptly at 12:30 Central Time. We will be accepting questions throughout the duration of the webinar today. To submit a question, please utilize the question and answer feature down at the bottom of your screen. Again, we will start promptly at 12:30 Central Time.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan Conrad. I'm president of ISF. I want to welcome you to our webinar, Elevating to the Cloud. It's very exciting to have you join us today, so looking forward to the conversation. Before we jump into it, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about ISF and who we are. ISF has been providing, helping our clients solve the future through strategy, process, and technology services in government for more than 40 years. You know, our focus is really, look, we know you have visions, we know you have goals, you have plans that you want to accomplish, probably moving to the cloud. So our goal is to help you navigate the challenges you face and to be able to accomplish the goals that you have in mind. But by doing that, a lot of the times what we'll do is bring in partners that help us increase the capabilities and solutions and services we can provide. Partners like Intact, whom we're very excited to have join us today. Intact Partners has been a friend and partner of ours for many years, working to provide cloud services across the country to different government clients. So very excited to have them join us, and I think you'll really get a lot of value out of this conversation. So without further ado, I want to hand this over to Nick Aliberti, who is a client partner with ISF, and he'll be able to tell you and kind of get this going and tell you more about the webinar, and then we will get this started. So thank you so much for joining us. Nick?
Hey, thank you, Jonathan, and welcome everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Really appreciate you joining us here today for our webinar. As Jonathan said, my name is Nick Aliberti. I'm a client partner with ISF, and I'll be helping to moderate our webinar today. Before we begin and bring in our featured speaker, I just wanted to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. First, as April said, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature on your Zoom menu. We'll be answering them near the end, but if we're in the middle of a topic and a question comes up, feel free to put it into the question and answer chat at that time, and then we can refer back to it later on. We'll do our best to get through all of the questions, and if we, for some reason, can't get to every question on there, we'll find a way to follow up afterwards. Secondly, while most of us have become Zoom experts in the last year, I'll remind you that to maximize your screen real estate, you can close or minimize your video gallery. So find the gallery with all of the video screens and either click the minimize button or reduce it down to only one window, and that'll give you a bit better view. We'll be sharing contact information at the end of our presentation in case any of the topics we discussed today bring up any interest, if you'd like to reach out afterwards and discuss with us. So we'll give you the ability to reach out to us. And finally, we're going to be performing a couple live polls throughout the presentation today, and we really appreciate your participation. In these polls, your identity will be anonymized to the audience, so the rest of the guests will see answers, but we won't know who they're from. So don't be afraid of answering honestly and candidly. To begin, we'll test this out now with our first poll, which you'll see on your screen in a moment. This should be an easy question. We'd love to get an idea of your role within your organization. So let us know, are you a technology leader? This can be CIO, CTOs, data officers, tech experts. Are you a technology support or maintenance? These are the folks whose role involves developing, supporting, or maintaining the technology within their organizations. Do you consider yourself end users, agency staff, the boots on the ground to use the tools that we'll be talking about today? Perhaps your executive oversight, like a commissioner, division director, et cetera, or something other than those four categories. So we'll give you a couple seconds here to select your answer, and be sure to click submit so that we can get your results. And then we'll close that in just a moment. All right, let's see. Our results will come up here in a moment. This is exciting. All right, April, let's close it. Those will come up shortly. Okay, so here we go. Excellent. This is what I was hoping for today. We've got a pretty even spread across all of those categories. And the reason that I say excellent is that we're hoping that from this webinar, there's really something for everyone. We hope you come away from this with some information that you find useful in your own organization's modernization efforts. So thanks everyone for taking part in that. We'll do that again a little bit later on. So thanks for your participation. So now that we've talked about who is here, let's talk briefly about why we're here. As Jonathan mentioned, when it comes to ISF, we're constantly working to stay abreast of the latest news, technology, potential or executed legislation, or any other information that we feel is important to be aware of, and oftentimes feel it's important to share with our partners like you. ISF's time-tested methodology involves helping you determine your strategies and the steps necessary to achieve those strategies, then determining the implementing the processes required to achieve those strategies, and finally implementing and supporting those strategies with technology as necessary. So with that in mind, our main focus today is on something which is going to be part of every government agency's strategy in some way, shape, or form, and that is modernization. All right. So in general, most government agencies are constantly working in some way, shape, or form to modernize their enterprise and the way they do business. It's a crucial part of most of our strategies, and it touches just about everyone within an organization. Today's technology leaders have a lot to deal with, in addition to generally working on their enterprise's modernization efforts. In Texas, for instance, a state in which ISF does business frequently, and from which we've got several attendees today. Hey, Texas. A law has just been passed called Senate Bill 475, which includes new technology-related mandates and deals with modernization in a way that were once general goals, but are now mandated. I mean, think of that. Our technology leaders, in many cases, were already working on establishing centers of excellence and working at their own pace to approach these goals, but now they're law. So they've, if it wasn't on your plate already, now it is. Not only does this include things like cloud computing, state risk and authorization management programs, but it also includes an interesting line about recommending and pursuing or adopting next-gen technologies like crypto, blockchain, robotic process automation, and AI. So now this is law, and if it wasn't on your plate, you've got to handle it now, right? So in addition to that, we're dealing with bad technology publicity. This can be data breaches, or even just last week, the internet went out for several companies in the Southwest United States. And as we all know, no agency wants to be part of a negative headline. Additionally, you're dealing with modernization efforts related to COVID-19. Many states, including Texas, pivoted beautifully to address the challenges of remote working when it came to coronavirus with software and hardware purchases. But if we're being honest, many of those solutions were Band-Aids, and we still need to approach them from a long-term solution. And on top of all of those things that you're already dealing with, we've got this issue in the back of countless at-risk legacy applications. This is the focus of today's webinar, and these applications can be lurking in the background. Modernization has many challenges. So we're all in the same boat in how we're approaching this. We're looking at it from different perspectives. Our IT leaders are working on leveraging the latest technologies and what's going to help their teams work better. But they're also responsible for giving their customers the ability to operate on a day-to-day basis. They're typically aware of all the cloud opportunities, but implementing those opportunities typically take a lot of time. Conversely, on the other side, the end users, they need to be able to do their jobs. The tools need to function properly, be secure, predictable, maintainable. But oftentimes those staff don't have the resources, time, knowledge, some combination of those to be able to enact the change that they need to modernize. And they're aware of cloud opportunities often, but not sure how to leverage those. So everyone is sort of stuck trying to figure out the best way to approach the problem, which leads to a condition I like to refer to as modernization paralysis. Do you have symptoms such as 1 to 1,000 or more legacy desktop applications nearing or at end of life? Perhaps you have many other objectives, goals, and barriers to success already requiring your attention. Maybe a feeling of being stuck trying to figure out the best way to approach the problem, or uncertain of your strategy. Do we go for the quick wins, low-hanging fruit, or some sort of broad, elongated effort that's going to take a lot more time but capture a lot more success, or some combination of the two? So we know that everyone's dealing with questions like these, and that's why we brought in a really wonderful guest speaker today. James Ford of Intact Partners is going to jump in a moment, and he's going to help us understand sort of how we got to our current situation, and he'll help us demystify the cloud also so we can talk about it objectively. And finally, James is going to give you some insights into what steps you and your organization can take to achieve or supplement your own modernization strategies and solve the future. So without further ado, I appreciate your attention. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll introduce James Ford from Intact Partners. Take it away, James.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Nick. That's excellent. I'm just going to get my screen share running and we will be away. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. I really do appreciate your time. So the presentation that we've prepared for today is Elevating to the Cloud, Modernize Your Data to Solve the Future. Now, before we get into it, I just want to introduce ourselves a little bit more to you. Intact Partners, we are very much a Microsoft house. We were founded in 1981, and even though in 1981 we weren't specialists in cloud solutions for government agencies, we were very much an industrial automation business. We've been implementing Microsoft solutions ever since that date, and that's why we always bring it up. We're headquartered in Tallahassee, Florida, with a number of key members of the teams situated around the country, Texas, Virginia, Ohio. And the credentials that we hold with Microsoft include being a cloud solutions provider, direct resellers. For this, we are certified as authorized Azure government. We very much wear the Microsoft badge. We're able to bind Microsoft to agreements and deploy solutions either to our own tenant, serving as a managed service provider for the government cloud, or alternatively to your tenant connected to your security services. We've been on the Microsoft Partner Program since 1988, and we currently hold multiple gold competencies. As a business, we are very much a technology business. Our partners are really what makes us and carry us through to our end customers. Microsoft is our principal partner. Everything that we develop and the solutions that we create for our customers use 100% Microsoft delivered services. So they carry a lot of the same compliances too. We work very closely with partners such as ISF and Lumen, and it's really through partners like ISF who understand our customers, the end customers' strategy and processes, who find the right time to bring in a technology like ours and implement it as part of the ultimate strategy of the end customer. The solutions that we're going to get into a little later on today are available on contract vehicles like GSA and also on GSA Advantage. And really where we specialize from an end customer point of view is through the full spectrum of US government agencies, all the way from the most classified departments in the DoD through to state and local and the key applications which they depend on each and every single day. We help support that from an Azure cloud standpoint. A little bit of background on our Azure experience. We have been on the Microsoft Azure Insiders program since 2007 when it was first launched. Now in 2007, Microsoft Azure wasn't much more than a couple of cloud services sat on a virtual machine inside one of the Redmond offices, but our team was there building applications with those cloud services. Nonetheless, at current count today, the available cloud services on Azure are well in excess of 300. A key point in the recent history of our business is when our CEO, Larry Altman, served as the CIO of Florida Department of State between 2011 and 2013. And it was during his time in that role that he authored some of the language for the data exchange standards, which got taken into legislation, which enabled government agencies to purchase cloud services. Obviously moving from very much an owned asset in the way that we used to provision and purchase infrastructure to a leased asset when it comes to the cloud. Him and his team also migrated the Florida voting system to Azure, the very first state in the country to do so, and still widely revered to this day as one of the best voting systems. And then we're multi-cloud experts. And whilst we understand what's important when it may come to implementing hybrid cloud solutions, what we're really referring to here is the multiple government clouds which Microsoft provide and what needs to be understood and implemented right at the pre-planning stage of any application design to make sure it can be deployed to that particular government cloud. That's where we really specialize and we can really help. Now let's get started with today's presentation. So first, just want to give a brief outline of what we're going to cover. We're going to start with a brief history of computing, which really led to today's modernization challenge, particularly for state and local agency. We're going to distinguish 3 levels of cloud opportunity, helping to compartmentalize those opportunities and set out a roadmap on how we can make use of the various different levels. We're going to address 95% of the applications that need to be modernized within the business unit. And then finally, we're going to hopefully provide some solutions which will help you unlock your cloud modernization strategy. So before we get going today, we just have a couple of quick questions that we're going to run through a poll similar to what Nick did a little earlier on. So the first question is, which of these cloud utilities do you think offers the most opportunity? And the second is, what percentage of applications in your business unit have successfully been modernized to the cloud? Now, the poll should have appeared on your screen, and if you wouldn't mind just giving us a quick couple of answers, that would be most helpful. We'll just give it another sort of 30 seconds or so, and then we'll be presented with the results to those polls. So we'll start rounding that up now. If everybody's had a quick chance to answer those 2 questions for us, that'd be really appreciated. Perfect. Okay, so we can see there's quite an even spread when it comes to the level of cloud modernization, where the weighting really on the smaller side. There's still a lot of modernization that needs to happen for the audience on today's call. But interestingly, when it comes to the cloud opportunity, we can see that there are some well-informed individuals in the way of understanding what's most important to them and ultimately the workforce and their agency. Now, we're going to come back to these poll results a little bit later on in the presentation, but thank you very much for taking the time to answer that. It really is most helpful. So to get started, we're just going to go through a short history of computing, which hopefully will start to place some context around why we find ourselves in this legacy application modernization challenge that we face. So the first generation, as we see it, was really the mainframe. Now, it reached the mainstream really in the late 1960s, and the mainframe's core utility was enabling teams to complete repetitive tasks at great scale and great speed. And those repetitive tasks sort of fell into two categories, really, which aligned with the programming languages that were created. Fortran was very much for the scientific audience, and it was Fortran that we can really thank for putting men on the moon. COBOL is a programming language which was primarily used in the financial services industry, and it allowed the global financial service systems to really evolve and be created. And it's so intertwined in those systems, it's still widely in use today. But these mainframe systems were very exclusive to big business or large agencies within government. It really wasn't made available to the small to medium-sized business or agency. But that started to change. In the early 80s, there was the advent of the second generation of computing, the desktop computer. It was like putting every single worker in the workplace on a bicycle. And interestingly enough, Steve Jobs, when he first founded Apple, wanted to call the business Bicycle. And that was because the computer was seen to make every single worker 8 times more efficient than they were with a pen and paper, much the same as the bicycle made anybody looking to travel 8 times more efficient than walking or running. It gave way to the creation of digital information, and then digital documents and digital storage. Acres of office space freed up from filing cabinets to then being able to house more workers and a greater workforce. And really the innovation around that we have to thank to the handsome chap in the left-hand corner here, Mr. Bill Gates. His operating system, MS-DOS, with the programming language Microsoft Basic, gave way to a suite of applications which sat right there on each of these desktop computers, enabling each worker to do much more. It completely changed the paradigm of the way that people worked. Traditionally, when working with a pen and paper, you would think first and then write. With the advent of solutions such as Microsoft Word, we were able to write and think later. And it was this format that really we followed when putting together this presentation today. These other programs which were available on the desktop computer allowed these workers to complete repetitive tasks at great scale and great speed, much the same as what was in previous decades exclusive to just big business. Programs like Excel and Access became the foundation of business applications, which really improved the operations of any team. When a worker turned up to work one day and was asked to make the operations of their team more efficient, well, they built an application right there on that machine. And some of those applications were so successful that they're still depended on by teams inside the workplace today. And this really is where that legacy modernization challenge really began. Now, the core utility of the desktop computer was a productivity platform for everyone. But along came the internet, and some could say that the computer was dead, long live the computer. No longer was the information that was generated and created on that machine simply siloed to it. There was now an innovation in place where you could reach out and grab information from another machine, and for the same token, somebody from another machine could reach out and grab information from yours. Here's Mr. Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the internet with the original source code. But this created a huge security and compliance issue for these legacy applications, of course, which were built without the internet in mind. The idea that this invasion of computer data could take place was never in the original creator's mindset. But it's the internet that gave way to this third generation of computing and the cloud. Everything all of a sudden became connected. And as connectivity grew, the advent of a category of solution known as SaaS, software as a service, really began to grow. In the image on the left-hand side, we can see a 1999 version of Salesforce.com. Rather than keeping my customer records in the Access database housed on my machine, I can now upload that information to the internet and make use of all of the infrastructure and innovation that this business was centrally developing for its hundreds, thousands, and then millions of customers. Because of the high competition in this space, it meant that there was rapid innovation across every single category of business. And these commercial businesses that were unregulated and didn't have to remain in control of their data were able to continuously move their workloads to modern solutions. they were able to modernize in step with the cloud as it innovated. And as we move forward to the present day, they have solved the problem of their smaller workloads and are now dealing with the issues of their more enterprise and overarching solutions. So the core utility of the cloud was really work from anywhere, with anyone, on anything. But that was only true for certain types of business that didn't have to remain in control of their data. And so there really is a second generation of the third generation, the government cloud, which has only been available in recent years. Governments haven't been able to make use of the cloud because the services which are contained on the cloud weren't compliant and secure. Azure government since 2016 and later for some states has been made available with multi-layers of security and compliance that sits around the cloud services to ensure that they can be used by these different agencies. Access was suddenly unlocked at a very mature stage in the market. Rather than being able to grow and modernize in step like many commercial businesses, there was all of a sudden a tidal wave of what do we do first? What do we do now? Do we lean towards the leading edge, or do we focus on what commercial business have been dealing with for many years? Now that tidal wave of cloud services is a big one, but it's businesses like ours and ISF that are here to help you ride it. Because now the core utility for government agencies of the cloud is to work from anywhere, with anyone, on anything, but in a secure and compliant fashion, making sure that you consistently remain in control of your data at both a user level and then also at an enterprise level too. So that brings us to the cloud of opportunity that's presented to us today. Now I'll refer back to the poll that we asked at the top of the presentation, and we gave you 5 options, and we, as I mentioned already, there's around 300 or in excess of 300 cloud services available on just Azure. But we picked out these 5 because when we normally ask this question, what we find is the audience leans toward the likes of AI, ML, Internet of Things, and AR, VR. And the reason that they do that is 90% of what we read in the press today is centered around these leading edge innovations. When as a matter of fact, when you're looking to create the biggest significant impact for the workforce, it's elevating the way that they work to the modern workplace. And I was pleased to see that 50% of the answers that we received today were the modern workplace answer. So it's with this in mind that we've started to try to break out the 3 levels of cloud opportunity. Now, we know there are many more than what's presented on the screen right this moment, but we wanted to pick out some of the key ones that we believe that you may have in mind for your cloud strategy. Now, this particular depiction starts in the left-hand corner, and when we're working upwards, each of these services requires a significantly higher amount of data in order to get the most from it. As we move from left to right, we can see the number of the workforce, the amount of workforce workers that are directly affected by the successful implementation of any one of these cloud services. And then the triangle depicts the volume of applications inside the business unit which need to be modernized or can take advantage of this particular cloud service. So over here on level 1, which is really our cloud foundation that should be provided to all of those legacy applications, is accessibility, being able to work from anywhere, with anyone, on anything, but in that secure and compliant fashion, making sure that it falls within the confines of your security policies. Collaboration, being able to work in an application at the same time as a colleague. Many of these legacy applications which were developed with old versions of Access and Excel can only have one worker in there at any one time. That directly plays into the productivity that can come from that application because it's siloed to a particular machine. Are we having to manually create the reports on a daily or weekly basis? And then what ties into that is the communication aspect. We've seen the successful deployment of solutions such as Teams, but Teams is only one component of this modern workplace. And what we want to make sure is this all wraps up in a secure and compliant model. Once we start to take control of all of these legacy applications at this baseline of modern workplace, we then open up a world of opportunity for integrations, automated business intelligence, because every single application and all of the data that our agency owns is now accessible and fungible. And as we move all the way up to the level 3, when we're looking for large data sets in order to take advantage of things such as AI or adaptive ML, well, we now have that data because all we've done is taken control of what we already owned.
Hey, James, Nick here. I have a quick question if I could interrupt you briefly.
No problem, Nick. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So talking about the modern workplace, and we touched briefly at the beginning of the webinar about the effect of coronavirus and COVID-19. In your opinion, how did COVID-19 affect our progress? You know, we were already kind of approaching modernization, you know, since 2016, but would we have been in the same place and now that we are the same place now that we would have been had COVID-19 not gotten in our way?
I think it certainly expedited the modernization process. What COVID did was really shine a spotlight on how many applications inside a business unit did not meet the modern workplace standard. When individuals were asked to stay at home because we didn't understand this beast and how dangerous it might be, many of them were unable to, because that particular application, which their citizens depended on, only existed on a siloed machine within the workplace. Because it wasn't on the network, they couldn't access it through a VPN or any other solutions. And so many workers were forced to come to the workplace and then often work without necessarily desktop support. So if there were any issues, things would really start to become quite problematic and support inquiries would compound. As a result of that, we've certainly seen an uptick in the interest of how can we effectively modernize all of these applications that we have at scale.
Sure. So in other words, our modernization efforts, we had momentum, and that momentum was stunted, and we need to catch up.
Yeah, I think what we did was we managed to find some band-aids for it, but now we really need to put in some solutions which are going to last and allow us to, you know, elevate our business to thinking about the opportunities that reside at level 2 and 3, because we know our workforce is optimized with a solid foundation of modernization.
Indeed. Well, thank you for your answer on that. I just want to make a quick announcement to our guests regarding questions and answers. We are aware that some of our guests are having a difficulty asking questions in the Q&A. I'm going to do a Band-Aid solution myself and put my contact information and email address in our chat function. So if you do have a question you'd like to ask, and you're able to send it over via email, and we'll do our best to address it at the end of the presentation if it comes in by then, or we can address it afterwards in an email back to you. But we appreciate your patience with that. If you can see the Q&A function and you would like to ask a question, please take advantage of that. So thanks again, as you were, James.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks for the question, Nick. So these legacy applications, ultimately your anchor to the past. You know, how do we define them? What are they? They are invariably applications which were built on Microsoft Access or Excel many, many years ago, and they still exist to this day because the operations of that team depend on them. They're years old, often decades, and so they're stuck with the level of technology that was available at that moment in time. And as we've already mentioned, they're confined to a single machine. As they're confined to a single machine, only one worker can work in there at any one time. And it's impossible to link it to any automations that could potentially be available. And this really talks to that point there of being out of reach and out of control. It's out of reach for the worker. They can't access it should they be required to stay at home, but it's also out of reach and out of control for the IT business unit, who are looking to track it for possible security breaches, who are looking to understand what data they are currently in possession of and currently responsible for. And so there's a huge amount of restrictions that sit across these legacy applications. And of course, they're time consuming. If I need to take the data from 2 or 3 different applications and combine it into a report, this could take hours, days, and even in some of the cases that we've seen, weeks to generate and really provide to those that require the insights from the data. Now, how big is the problem? A few years ago, we worked alongside Microsoft to conduct a piece of research to gain an understanding of how big the issue really is. And what we found is there's 1.2 billion active licenses for Microsoft Access. Now, of course, this spans across regular consumers and commercial business. And so to draw this down into really relevant to government, the US Air Force acknowledges that they have 2 access databases per air person. This equates to 600,000 access databases, which need to be modernized to the cloud. A recent customer of ours, a State Department of Finance, ran a search across their network to see how many of these legacy applications were still in active use, and they had 3,500 of them. Now, the script that they ran on the network was a PowerShell script. This is a Microsoft product which allows you to search for certain file types on the network. We can provide it to anyone that may be interested in it after today's call. But what this equates to is 95% of the total number of legacy applications in state and local government that need to be modernized have not been modernized yet. So when it comes to tackling this huge area in need of modernization, we need to ask ourselves, ultimately, what is our strategy? What is the process that we need to follow? And therefore, what is the technology that fits? Now, if the strategy across our cloud modernization strategy is to systematically modernize legacy systems in line with where timeline quality and cost have the greatest effect to the business unit, then the process is likely to be something along the lines of a repeatable modernization model, which ensures all modernized apps are able to play nice with one another once in the cloud. Now, this means if we've got one stream of operations over here that's modernizing an application and another running alongside it focused on another app, how do we know when they reach their endpoint that those apps are going to be able to work together? We're going to be able to see the data ultimately together, and they're also going to hopefully utilize the same services in order to make sure that they're cost efficient as well. Well, the technology needs to play its part there. It needs to be a cloud platform which can be deployed to your tenant and connected to your security service. And it provides the flexibility to cater for the range of user requirements, something that can be consistent on the back end, but ultimately provide flexibility on the front end to adapt to whatever the application requirements are. Now, when it comes to assessing these legacy applications that we've discussed today, and what would be the solution in modernizing them to our Azure government tenant, well, this was the traditional route. You would provision a virtual machine, you would decide what it needed to include in order to cater for the requirements of the application. You would set up a SQL Server database to accommodate the data, and then you would go about developing the app services that the application would require, how it would consume them, and then connect it to your security service, eventually deploying it to your tenant. Now, the typical dependence on these legacy applications is anywhere between 1 and 5 individuals. The time to modernize, of course, this changes based on the requirements of the app and maybe the number of reports that it needs to generate and so on. But the average that we have always found is the modernization takes in excess of 6 months, with a typical cost of $100,000 plus the ongoing cloud services. Now, when it comes to prioritizing which apps to modernize inside a business unit, these would often be looked at and say, well, if there's only 5 dependents, well, why don't we modernize the one that has 50 dependents first? Given that the time and costs still are quite considerable. But the solution that we want to present to you today turns this inside out. Much like commercial business were able to take advantage of SaaS solutions for many years, Reaccess is a solution that addresses the problem that we've been discussing and provides some real efficiencies in its modernization. Reaccess provides the tooling to rapidly recreate any existing Access or Excel database. It automatically connects to your security service. It automatically configures the cloud database, and it will automatically provide the app services that that application needs in the quantity that it needs them when it needs them. And you simply deploy the application to your government tenant. The modernization process requires no coding and typically takes much less than a month. Often when you break it down to working days, it's 5 to 7 working days. And the typical cost for that service to recreate the app, recreate your reports, levels out at around $10,000. And the only ongoing cost is on a per user basis which starts at $35. And inside that license cost, there's no limit to the amount of applications that the user can use. What's important about reAccess is it has all the hallmarks that Access and Excel do. It's familiar. Everybody will understand how to use it already because it follows that same Microsoft way of usability of Microsoft applications. But it's also very familiar for your enterprise service because the data model is consistent, because the security service is consistent. You're able to understand what data is contained within any one of these applications at any time and make use of it as part of your level 2 and level 3 cloud opportunity utilization. So the product. reAccess has been built to convert existing Access databases and Excel spreadsheets to 100% Microsoft Azure cloud applications. The applications are deployed to your government tenant and automatically connect to your security service. In fact, they use the same security service that you use to log into the likes of Office 365. And so you would simply use those login credentials and it would adopt the same security policies. You remain in full control and ownership of your data. There's native multi-level access control, so you can start to determine whether certain users should be able to view certain forms or access certain records right there within the app. And there's a full audit trail of any change that is made all the way down to the field level. So if a single character changes, the application will actually create a completely new record for the app. And then in the database itself, that old record is archived along with the information of who made the change and when. Network communications come with guaranteed resilience, all managed by Microsoft, and it integrates with your existing Microsoft services. This includes Office 365 and Power BI. And because the back end is completely no code, those with the permission to do so are able to go into that app builder and make any changes and tweaks to the app to make sure it is current and relevant to what that team requires it to do, making for super easy maintenance and less ongoing support. So the question we always get is, can I buy it? And we're pleased to say that the solution is available on a number of different contract vehicles. It's on the GSA Schedule 70 contract, which includes GSA Advantage, so it can be purchased with a simple swipe of the card. It's also available through ISF agreements and the NASPO Value Point contract. And I know it may be relevant to some of the individuals on the call today. It's also available through DBITS. Because the solution is built using 100% Microsoft Cloud services, it carries a lot of the same compliances as other Microsoft services do. It's deployable to GCC and GCC High. All data contained within the applications are always meet HIPAA, PCI, FISMA, and a whole range of other compliances. So if there's any particular compliances which are important to you, please just let us know and we can get you some literature around how we meet that particular compliance. And this is a brief look of what the service looks like. So our service partners, ISF, who understand your strategy and understand your processes, will be able to provide this type of service on top of the technology. It includes a hyper-agile development workshop, which we'll take a further look at in just a moment, which allows us to understand your application and rapidly recreate it. You'll then have a working prototype of that application the very same day, where you can critique and improve, add data fields, take some of them away that maybe haven't been used for years because they're no longer relevant. Inside that $10,000 price point, you'll be able to recreate anywhere up to 3 existing reports with Power BI. No longer will you need to manually create reports. These will all be automatically generated through the Power BI implementation. In-app reports can also be recreated. A customer of ours uses reAccess for their permitting application. And when they create a new permit, they want to be able to generate that as a physical permit. And so at a click of a button, the Word document appears populated with all the permit information, and it's printable to create that physical copy. All users will receive training, and there's also assistance with data migration. It's such a simple workflow. Where we've seen the greatest level of success is when agencies are able to outsource most of the work to a partner like ISF. It doesn't require any development, and all deployments happen on your government tenant and on your security service. So you're able to work with your partner really to do a lot of these modernizations in very short step in parallel. So this here starts to get into that hyper agile development cycle that I referred to a moment ago. We start with the existing legacy application, and if it's an Access application, we have the advantage of using a decoder. This app decoder will break that app down to object level and push it out into an app template, which can then be deployed as a re-Access application. If we don't have an Access app and it's a large Excel spreadsheet, or we just want to do a little bit of refining on that existing application, then we push it through our LAD process. LAD stands for Live Application Design and Development, and it's a methodology that was developed internally by our operations team. Once we go through that LAD process of really flattening out the app and finding out what's important to it, we then push it into the app template and deploy to re-Access, of course, where there's a full no-code app builder in the back end as well for us to make any tweaks and get it just right. Once the app's right, we then help you through a data extraction from the existing application and import to the new one so that team can get back to work on its new modern workplace standard app. So this is the LAD canvas. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's about flattening out the app and really understanding what's important to it. In the top left-hand corner here, we have entities. This is our forms, our screens. This is where we enter information about, this is where we want to be entering information into our application. Each of these screens is going to be made up of a collection of fields, the data that we wish to collect. Our static lists are the lists that remain the same. Our dynamic lists are ones that evolve as more data gets added to the system. Those dynamic lists are really what draw the relationships in the application, but in the relationships box here in the top right, this is where we make those clear and we're sure that they're all accounted for. Tabs and dividers is where we start to get into what's this going to look like in the app, how does data need to be collected and presented to the user, and then attributes is where things get a little more granular. What fields need to be included? Do we need to take into consideration things such as file attachments? Where do they need to be placed? And so on. And notes, this is where we may start looking at reports that are going to be recreated. Now, I mentioned earlier a permitting application that a customer of ours uses. And this is actually the LAD canvas that was put together for that app. The forms that they required were contractors, permits, payments, and inspections. The static list, the list that would always remain the same and constant throughout the app, was states, permit status, permit type, inspection type, and payment type. And those dynamic lists, the ones that evolved, was the permit number, the contractor, and the owner. So every time a new contractor is added into the application, well, that then becomes available as a drop down, potentially on, let's say we want to select a particular contractor for an inspection. On the inspection record, we would be able to choose from the contractors which are available in the app. And those relationships are then confirmed in the relationships box. Tabs, this is where we get into the UI. And as we mentioned a moment ago, the output of the reports are also mentioned here as well. So here's just a few screen grabs of exactly how that app now looks and feels for the user. And this creation really happened in a matter of working days, from legacy to modern workplace standard app. In the top left-hand corner is a screen grab of a record inside the application. We can see across the top of this screen grab that there are 4 tabs. Now, these are tabs, collections of data which make up this particular record. As we enter the information and we save it, that will save as a record in the app. And then every single form has its own customizable search screen, which is what we see in the data view box in the bottom left-hand corner. All of that, you can then search for records. There's a whole manner of actions which can be taken for that record as well. And as we mentioned earlier, any changes, any actions that are made inside the application hold a full audit trail. In the bottom right-hand corner is a screen grab from the app builder itself. Here we can see that we're creating a form. We're giving a name of the form to be contractor. Every single element of the application has descriptors in it. Now, so when we talk about the future opportunity of implementing potentially AI or ML across our data network, these descriptors can become particularly valuable because they add context to every single item of data which is contained within your enterprise, which is sat on re-Access. Here we have form, but we may want to build it out in more of a hashtag fashion or give it a real description as well. And these descriptors are given to fields as well as forms, so there's full context around every single app and the data that each field contains. You can then dictate what actions someone is able to take on that particular form inside the app and do a whole manner of other things to make the user experience better. But because there's a native integration with Power BI, in the top right-hand corner, we can see one of the reports that we've generated using Power BI. Now, in this particular instance, the customer wanted to make the permits public to their citizens because it's public information. So any citizen can come to this page at any time, search for a permit number, and then see that record. For those of you that haven't used Power BI before, it's a really powerful tool, and I'm sure you will almost find immediately that it will start to unearth some insights that you knew were there but you weren't able to reach previously, but it will also do it in an automated fashion as well. Now we're drawing to the end of the presentation today, but where we started was mapping out why we find ourselves with this modernization challenge and how there are a significant number of these legacy desktop applications which are really anchoring the workforce to the past. Now, if we're able to use SaaS solutions like commercial business have been able to take advantage of for many, many years in the shape of something like Reaccess, then we give our business unit the opportunity to unlock our data. We start to become in control of the data that we do already own, but when it's now reachable and viewable to the enterprise. We unlock functionality, both at the user level, because they're able to work with anyone on anything at any time, but also at the enterprise level as well. Because that data is now reachable, it's now also readable, and it can contribute towards these more advanced cloud services which are available to us. And that really talks to that unlocking of the opportunity. At the base of all of this, it also makes your systems compliant. Any of those legacy applications which are using data fields for completely different purposes to what they were originally intentioned, because that's just how business units do sometimes evolve, all of those creases can be ironed out, and all of the data contained within these applications will become compliant. It will enable you to complete your rollout of Windows 10 operating system and start to retire any additional support packages that you may be having to run because these legacy apps will only run on legacy operating systems. And as a result of all of this, you'll start to see significant cost savings. As each of these applications is able to benefit from the same collective cloud services, you'll see those costs come down across the board. That's the end of the presentation for today, but potentially the start of a new beginning for your modernization strategy, I hope. We're going to get into some Q&A now, so if there's any questions that we can answer, we will be more than happy to do so.
Thank you, James. Great presentation. We really appreciate you bringing some of your expertise to the fore today. Thanks again, everyone, for attending today. Just a quick recap. We talked a little bit about the history of how we got to where we are today, considering technology and modernization efforts, kind of try to put the cloud in context, and then talked a little bit about some solutions, including Intact's very unique and powerful solution, Reaccess. We got about 10 minutes here. We'll take a few questions, and I got a couple popping up in the Q&A section here. So let's see, James, in the permitting application example you provided earlier, about how long did that project take to complete?
Yeah, really good question. So from initial engagement all the way through to the deployment of application with data migration was around 5 weeks. The actual working time of the team creating the prototype was a single day. Some critiquing and refining at the customer end took a few days for them to get back to us. And then really most of the time came in getting the data migration carried across. As part of the data migration tooling, we're able to pick out any inconsistencies in the data automatically. So it starts to actually provide some really valuable tools to get all of the data clean in a more presentable fashion. And so it's really a fresh start with the new deployment. So working days was about 5. The actual timeline from start to full deployment was about 5 weeks.
Wow, that's really impressive. And it's sort of in that same line of questioning, you mentioned no code. Why is no code important?
No code is important for a variety of reasons. We want to create as much autonomy in our business unit as possible. These legacy applications haven't had any real support for many, many years. They're running on systems invariably which have reached their end of life. And so there has always been a go-to guy or girl on the floor which understands where to knock on the boiler to get it working again. It's going to be those individuals that don't have coding experience or development backgrounds that are going to continue to support on these apps. So being able to understand what needs to change, providing they have permission to do so, to go in, make the tweak and get that team back to work, it's going to relieve a lot of the stress from the IT shop.
That's indeed. And it sounds like for folks like myself who may not be as technologically savvy, it's sort of empowering that we can maintain a product like this without expert oversight or expert training.
And it's actually a really interesting point, Nick. That's a really important factor of no code, is it allows business units to outsource the modernization of the applications that need to be modernized. Because we're ultimately, with no code, bringing together pre-coded items, well, they're consistent. And so you can trust your partners like ISF to do that bringing together, knowing what the end production result is going to be inside your tenant, rather than it being original code, which may cause issues. It's predictable, it's constant.
Excellent. Considering the last year with coronavirus, the workshops that you kind of gave an overview of, can those be performed remotely or do you have to be in person?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Nick. And in fact, we begin with remotely. Working closely with our partners, Lumen, they've been utilizing Reaccess for virtual collaboration workshops for application prototyping. And really, we will start with virtual workshops to complete the work. It's a lot less disruptive to people's days and allows us to move forward efficiently. But if people prefer face-to-face, then that, of course, can be organized as well.
Yeah, certainly as we approach more uncertainty as in the coming weeks from what it looks like, it's good to be aware of that and know that we can do the work that we need to and still have the same level of success remotely, right? We want to make sure that we're not sacrificing anything by having to do remote work with our partners. Let's see. I've got one more question here that came in through the Q&A. You mentioned contract vehicles and ways to purchase, but didn't talk much about procurement, which can be a little confusing. Agreed. Do you all have experience helping customers navigate or understand procurement options for them in their organization? I think this might be good to direct back to Jonathan. Jonathan, are you on the line with us still?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Excellent. You want to take a swing at that last one?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a really good question. I mean, state government procurement in particular, obviously there's a lot of process there and there's a lot of things that you got to make sure you're following the right rules. We are on, as James mentioned earlier, ISF is on multiple contract vehicles across the country. We work, really state government is what we do. So we absolutely understand state government process and policy and procurement rules. And we know how to follow those processes. We can help you in navigating what that is for your state. We are on the DBITS contract in Texas, for example. We know how to work with DIR in Texas and how that process goes. We're also on another vehicle there, Comprehensive Web Development and Managed Services. So there's multiple contract vehicles available. And of course, again, we know how to work with DIR and other agencies in Florida, the same kind of thing. Lots of different procurement rules, but also on pretty much every contract vehicle available in that state. And we're also on the federal GSA, which allows us to do procurement across the country in any state. So there's a lot of different angles that you can take, and we can absolutely help you navigate that. If you want to reach out to us, we can walk through that process with you for your state and kind of what that looks like in the different categories that we're on for various contract vehicles.
Thanks for that. And that's not to exclude, of course, utilizing your state or your agency's procurement team, we want to be able to supplement that, right? They are the experts, but we've done a lot of work in this area and can certainly provide some guidance here and there to make sure that whatever questions folks may have, or if they're apprehensive about how they can move forward with these sorts of solutions, we can kind of be a sounding board for them. Sounds like that's what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. Unless there are any remaining questions, I don't believe any others have come through right now. I did put my email into the chat for the meeting. If you'd like to send anything afterwards, please send it to me. That's N as in Nick, Aliberti at isf.com. And we really appreciate you. I'm going to send it back to Jonathan here to wrap us up, but I want to personally thank James and the Intact team for putting a lot of hard work into a wonderful presentation. Hope all of our attendees today got a lot of great value out of this, regardless of your position in the organization. And thanks for allowing me to help moderate today. Jonathan, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And again, thank you everyone for participating. This is really great having you all on. Very excited to be able to share this information with you. And as Nick said, thanks, James and Intact Partners. You've been a great teaming partner with us, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And thanks for the information. Do want to let everyone know that you will be getting a survey. It really would help us if you would fill that out. Let us know not only what you thought about this presentation, but also what we can do in the future. We want to continue bringing information to you that provides value. So do that survey for us. That would be really helpful. You will also be receiving, we have recorded this presentation. So if you want to kind of go back and see what James had said at a certain point or look at additional information, that will be sent out as well. So we'll make sure you get that. And again, thank you so much for participating. You do have our contact information here. One of the things we really want to stress to you is that we want to help. We really do want to be your partner. We want to be able to just help you through, if you have questions, if you want to talk about what the next steps might be, if we can provide additional information, our contact information is here. You can call us directly. We'll be happy to guide you and just answer any questions you have. We really do want to be your partner. So again, thank you for being here, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.